For decades, John Deere was the backbone of American agriculture. Farmers trusted its iconic green machines to power their fields, drive their businesses, and fuel the economy. But now, that trust is shattered. Layoffs, outsourcing, skyrocketing equipment costs, a farming crisis that threatens the entire $34.05 billion industry. Farmers are fighting back, and the future of U.S. agriculture hangs in the balance. This isn't just about tractors. It's about economic survival. From small-town farming communities to major global trade markets, John Deere's boldest move yet has set off a chain reaction that could reshape American farming forever. For nearly 2 centuries, John Deere has been more than just a company. It has been the beating heart of American agriculture. Farmers across the United States have relied on its iconic green machines to cultivate fields, harvest crops, and drive the economy of rural America. With a history spanning more than 180 years, John Deere became synonymous with innovation, reliability, and the American farming dream. But today, that dream is turning into a nightmare. The company that once symbolized strength and prosperity is now at the center of an industry-wide crisis. Once seen as an unshakable force in agricultural machinery, John Deere is struggling with declining sales, a frustrated customer base, and an economic downturn that has sent shockwaves throughout the farming world. The numbers tell a grim story. The American agricultural industry, valued at more than $34 billion, is crumbling under the weight of falling crop prices, skyrocketing operational costs, and shifting global trade dynamics. And now, the one company that farmers have trusted for generations is facing its biggest challenge yet. So how did this happen? How did the undisputed leader of farming equipment find itself in such turmoil? It all began with a devastating wave of layoffs. And when the layoffs started rolling in, the impact was felt far beyond the factory floor. John Deere has long been a pillar of stability in farming communities, employing tens of thousands of workers across the United States. But in recent months, the company has made drastic cuts, laying off workers in multiple plants, and restructuring its operations in response to declining sales. More than 4,500 jobs have been eliminated since the year 2015, and the numbers keep climbing. Just this year, nearly 200 factory workers in Iowa alone lost their jobs due to production slowdowns. In a town where John Deere is often the biggest employer, these layoffs hit hard. Families that have depended on the company for generations are now struggling to find work, and local businesses that relied on John Deere employees' spending are feeling the strain. But these layoffs are just a symptom of a deeper issue. Farmers are not buying new equipment. With declining crop prices and rising costs, farmers are postponing or outright canceling purchases of tractors, harvesters, and other machinery. And when fewer farmers buy, John Deere sells less, forcing the company to scale back production and let go of workers. This economic domino effect is devastating rural America. Many farming communities were already struggling, and losing high-paying manufacturing jobs only adds to the crisis. Entire towns are built around John Deere factories, and when the company cuts jobs, it is not just employees who suffer, it is an entire way of life that is being threatened. And it is not just the workers feeling abandoned. Farmers themselves are turning away from John Deere in record numbers. For generations, John Deere was the gold standard in farm equipment. Farmers were willing to pay a premium for its tractors, harvesters, and precision farming tools because they knew they were getting top-tier reliability and performance. But that loyalty has been eroding, and fast. One of the biggest reasons? John Deere's aggressive anti-repair policies. Farmers are furious that they cannot repair their own tractors without going through Deere's expensive, restrictive software system. The company has locked its equipment behind a digital wall, preventing independent mechanics and farmers from making even the most basic fixes without paying exorbitant fees. This has fueled the growing right-to-repair movement, with farmers across the country demanding the ability to fix their own equipment without being forced to rely on Deere's authorized technicians. The backlash has been so severe that some states have passed laws requiring John Deere to loosen its repair restrictions. But for many farmers it is too little, too late. As frustration grows, farmers are actively seeking alternatives to John Deere. Brands like Kubota, AGCO, and Case 1H are gaining traction by offering more repair-friendly equipment at competitive prices. Some farmers are even turning to smaller, lesser-known brands or imported machinery from countries like China, a market that Deere once dominated. John Deere's problems are not just about its business decisions. A massive economic shift is reshaping agriculture worldwide, and it is hitting American farmers and John Deere hard. One of the biggest factors? The collapse of U.S. crop prices. Since the year 2022, the price of corn has plummeted by 37%. Soybean prices have dropped by 24%. Wheat, down by 35%. For farmers, this is devastating. Lower crop prices mean lower profits, making it even harder to justify spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on new machinery. And then there is China. For years, experts predicted that China would become one of the world's biggest importers of American-grown food. That prediction did not come true. Instead of relying on U.S. farms, China heavily invested in its own agricultural sector, ramping up domestic food production at an unprecedented pace. The result? Less demand for American exports, and yet another financial hit for U.S. farmers. The global economic downturn is making things worse. Inflation has driven up the costs of everything from diesel fuel to fertilizer. Meanwhile, high interest rates have made borrowing money more expensive than ever, making it nearly impossible for struggling farmers to take out loans for new equipment. All of these pressures have combined into a perfect storm that is devastating American agriculture, and John Deere is feeling the full force of it. But in an attempt to escape this storm, John Deere made its most controversial decision yet, one that sparked outrage across the country. When John Deere announced that it would be shifting part of its manufacturing operations to Mexico, the reaction was immediate and explosive. Farmers, workers, and politicians across the country saw this as a betrayal, a move that put corporate profits ahead of American jobs. For John Deere, the decision was all about cutting costs and staying competitive. The company claimed that moving some production, such as cab assembly, to Mexico would help it optimize its operations. By keeping high-value manufacturing in the United States while outsourcing lower-skill tasks, Deere argued that it could reduce expenses without abandoning American production entirely. On paper, it made sense. Mexico offers cheaper labor, lower operating costs, and favorable trade policies. By relocating certain tasks, John Deere believed it could reinvest in innovation, ensuring long-term profitability. But for workers in the United States, this was nothing short of a slap in the face. Thousands of John Deere employees had already lost their jobs due to layoffs. Now, instead of rebuilding, the company was choosing to move jobs out of the country. It did not take long for former President Donald Trump to weigh in. Known for his hardline stance on trade and manufacturing, Trump saw John Deere's move as a direct attack on American jobs. And in true Trump fashion, he fired back with a massive threat. At a campaign rally, Trump promised to impose a 200% tariff on John Deere imports if the company followed through with its plans to shift production to Mexico. The logic behind Trump's threat was simple. If John Deere wanted to manufacture in Mexico, they would pay the price when trying to sell those products back in the United States. A 200% tariff would make it nearly impossible for Deere to profit from imports, forcing the company to rethink its decision. John Deere's decision to move jobs to Mexico was not just a political issue, it was personal for thousands of American farmers. For decades, Deere had been seen as a symbol of American farming strength. The company's success was intertwined with the success of rural communities, but now many of those same communities felt abandoned. In response, farmers began organizing protests and boycotts. Across the Midwest, farmers held rallies outside John Deere dealerships, demanding that the company rethink its decision. Some farmers even stopped purchasing John Deere equipment altogether. They turned to competitors like Kubota, Case IH, and AGCO, looking for alternatives to a company they believed had turned its back on them. For decades, the United States has dominated global agriculture. American farmers have fed not only their own country but much of the world, exporting billions of dollars worth of crops and equipment each year. But that dominance is now under threat, and China is leading the charge. Once seen as a country that would always rely on imports to feed its massive population, China has flipped the script. Through a combination of government investment, new technology, and strategic policies, China has rapidly transformed itself into an agricultural powerhouse. One of the biggest shifts has been China's rise in farm equipment manufacturing. In the past, farmers across the world turned to brands like John Deere, Case IH, and New Holland for high-quality machinery. But now, Chinese companies are producing tractors, harvesters, and precision farming tools at a fraction of the cost. Take YTO Group and Zoomlion, two Chinese manufacturers that have aggressively expanded their market share in recent years. Their tractors and harvesters may not have the same reputation as John Deere, but they are far cheaper, sometimes costing half as much. And for farmers facing tight budgets, cheaper options are hard to ignore. In places like Africa, South America, and even parts of Europe, Chinese-made farm equipment is gaining traction. Many developing countries, which once relied on American exports, are now choosing China's cheaper alternatives. For John Deere, this presents a major problem. If farmers and global markets start turning away from American-made equipment, the company's future as a leader in the industry is in serious jeopardy. American farmers are facing a brutal economic reality. Crop prices have been falling, and many blame China's increased production for flooding the market. Corn prices, for example, have dropped by over 37% since 2022. Wheat prices have also plummeted, soybean prices have also plummeted, making it harder for farmers to turn a profit. A big reason for this? China is growing more of its own crops than ever before. For years, many believed that China's growing population and urbanization would make it one of the biggest importers of American agricultural products. The United States, as a top food exporter, was expected to profit from China's food needs for decades to come. But instead of increasing its reliance on U.S. imports, China invested heavily in its own agricultural production. By expanding irrigation, developing high-yield crop varieties, and embracing modern farming techniques, China has boosted its domestic crop production beyond expectations. As a result, they are now importing less from the United States, contributing to an oversupply crisis that has driven prices down. This has created a devastating ripple effect. With prices so low, many U.S. farmers are struggling to make ends meet. And when farmers make less money, they buy less equipment, which means companies like John Deere suffer even further. For decades, American farmers were told that China would always be a reliable market for exports. But now, that idea is being shattered, leaving the U.S. agricultural industry scrambling to find new buyers and new solutions.